Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Erasmus Expeditions. We are here with the 12th and final episode of this project, this experiment, if you will. It has been incredible so far, to say the least. I love to world build, and when Steve asked me along for this project, I couldn't say yes fast enough. And it's been a really, really cool trip so far, and I can't wait to finally be able to start running games in this setting. But before we get ahead of ourselves, this is episode 12, Sunderhearth World Building Project, improvised world building. This was the brain baby of Steve over on the other side over there. He has been my partner in crime throughout this entire endeavor. And each episode, we bring on a new guest, and they pitch ideas around just like we do. They have every bit as much of a say in creating this world. So we've had 14 distinct individual voices kind of feeding into this so far. So it's been really, really fun. Before we get anything else underway, our guest is a very good friend of mine and no stranger to the channel. But Kaeryn just celebrated her birthday yesterday, so happy birthday, Kaeryn. I'm glad that we can do this to celebrate. Yeah, sure, why not? I didn't get you anything else, so happy birthday. But yeah, I'm super happy that you've decided to come on and chit chat with us this evening. But before I let you say anything, I have to throw it over to that guy over there. Steve,
Oh,
say hi to the people.
hi to the people. Yeah, so it's been quite a year, right? And it's weird to say it's been a year. So tonight will be the session, the last, and then we get to move into the paperwork part of this, which, man, I'm so excited for. But it's been amazing. And it's been interesting to sort of see this whole thing grow and become what it's become. And I'm even more interested now to sort of see what people do with it when they can take it and run with it, like when we have it in a digestible format. So yeah, I'm super excited for that. And I'm really, really glad that we have Kaeryn on as our last guest. Like, you know, collectively, like, we actually end up spending a lot of time together between campaigns and this, and chatting about this behind the scenes, and so it's a lot of fun. Yeah, that's kind of all I got. I'm a little bit brain fried. Work was a bit nuts tonight, and so if anyone sees me die from my phone, I promise it's not fan mail. It is the police department getting a hold of me again. Not that I did anything bad. This is where I work. All right. Other than that, I guess, hey, Kaeryn, say hi to the people, but don't say hi to the people. I already did that.
Because that would be acid. Oh.
It would be. It would be.
I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to say. Hi, people. It's good to be here. It's watching this world grow from the tiny little ember that it started with into what it is now has been super exciting. So I'm very, very honored to be here today to be able to help kind of bookend it, I guess, like put the little bows and say, hey, except that, I know there's a lot of paperwork to do afterwards, so yay.
If we're gonna have signups in the comments for anyone who wants to do the paperwork part of it or draws pretty pictures or anything, all right, signups in the comments. I promise.
I have nothing else.
So yeah, all right. Well, I guess we can start off the last session the same way we start off all the sessions, right?
Talking about magic.
Talking about magic
Yes.
and Hearth Wardens.
Magic
That's
Earth
it.
Wardens.
That's it. That's the guys. It's been a year, and so far we know there are Hearth Wardens and magic. Yes,
And lots of them.
not Hearth Wardens,
No,
but
only
magic.
15.
Man, there's so much, lots of magic. But so what? Tonight's episode is really supposed to be hooks and a kind of a recap, right? And
Yeah.
so hooks being, what are we thinking? Like adventure hooks, character hooks, character ideas, adventure ideas. We left a lot of this sort of in the same genre and in the same palette as we painted Sunderhearth, with these sort of wide brushstrokes that narrow down to interesting bits, but don't ever box you in. Um, I think we can take hooks in the same way, like, kind of what does that mean, and what do you put in there to make it interesting, and kind of build from that. And we have so much material given to us by so many creative people that have come on and spoken with us and sort of breathed life into this, to be able to tease out some of that stuff now with specific ideas for hooks, and just sort of throw it out there saying, hey, if you want to, here's an idea, type of thing. Is that kind of the path that we were thinking?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I mean, we've kind of created the world already, and now we need to create the things that are going to coerce, convince players, adventurers to want to get involved. Um, and I think it's almost like creating one side of Velcro. Like you're creating something that's very easy to grab a hold of, so that when the players come along, they can hear just a single sentence or a single idea and be like, "Ooh, I want to explore that." So I think we're kind of creating that part, whether it deals with characters or whether it deals with locations within Sunderhearth, or some of the historical events that we've talked about. I think just anything that comes to mind would be fair game as far as I'm concerned.
I saw this really interesting. um, I thought it was beautiful, and I'm sure a lot of people have seen it. It just really struck me the other day. It's a webpage from forever ago. Like, I swear to you, it's probably late '90s, early 2000s, and it's 101 plots for campaigns. They're each 3 sentences long. That's it. It's written in a 3 sentence format to really just sort of grab you and sort of plant that kernel. And that's something that after we get like Sunderhearth put together, would be a really fun project to tackle, or to see someone tackle, would be something along those lines. But in that vein, all of us behind the scenes, are in the camera so far, have talked about, I want to play in this world, or I want to run in this world, and there are kind of ideas sort of percolating. So one of the things I'd like to ask to Jeremy, because we don't ask Jeremy a whole lot of questions in this, right? We're certainly asking the other person, and we'll get to you in a second, Kaeryn. Uh, as a player in Sunderhearth, from what you know so far, what's the thing that you look forward to exploring the most as a player versus a GM? And then, Kaeryn, I'm going to ask you the same question. So if you want to,
Man, that's tough. I don't put up a big barrier between like what I like as a DM and what I like as a player. There's not a whole
Mhm.
lot of difference for me, or if there is, it's the majority of the Venn diagram is overlap. Um, but as a player, I really want to sneak through the boundary at some point illegally. I think that's one of my bucket list items as a player for this setting. As a dungeon master, a whole lot. Um, I really want to explore the idea of monsters based on primary psychological traits. Um, the shattered parts of the god that are, you know, just wrath or just desire or etc. etc. The things that sounds like a lot of fun to me. I've always been a big fan of human psychology. I found it very, very interesting, and I think exploring that and taking the concept of a pure psychological trait and trying to assign a tangible monstrosity that represents that would be a really fun exercise.
it's very sort of oh man, I just lost his name. I think they just took away my theater degree. Oedipus. Right? It's sort of very Oedipal in the idea of like, I mean, Oedipus is the expression of a psychosis made to a character, made to a play, and being able to do that and go, hey, here's a psychological element turned into a monster. Because not to wax poetic, we all deal with fighting our own psychological monsters every single day. In fact, we were just chatting about this in our chat before we got on here, right? We all have our what'd you say? We all have our issues, our
isms.
Isms. That's what it was. So I think that's really cool. Like, what about you, Kaeryn? Like, where's your point of interest so far?
I was going to be smart ass and say I want to talk about magic. And
so Cole beat you to that in the chat over
I saw
here.
That. So, but my real answer is I am very excited about the chaoticness of inside Sunderhearth and seeing what it has done to the land, to the creatures, to anything really. And the ramifications of getting too close to it. So that's where my interest lies. So it really is in magic. So
I mean, that's completely fine. Like, I mean, like for me,
the Pirate City, but
I say the Pirate City is amazing. There's so much potential there. And I think it's really awesome to have a up and coming campaign setting, as skeletal as it may be, that has this, the goddess of lies, right, is sort of gender dimorphic, right? And then our pirate city is this pirate queen, and Sunderhearth is only stable because the queen, right? I think without leaning into that, we unintentionally did that, right? It felt very natural to do that. I think that's awesome. I like the villains in any story. I think villains make stories interesting. And so if you have to pick a villain in what we've discussed so far, right, you're going to lean towards the more charlatan of the two Sunderhearth kings, or you're going to go with the goddess of lies. And I love the idea of the Kaeryn sisters, and how that's like this political machine that is also combative and dangerous and so secret, but also so contained, right? Like, I mean, she raises these people from children to become these paladins of the church, but are monsters themselves. And I think you could actually do a short game playing those super soldier paladins, and how that, what's that look like? How what's the psychology of these guys and women having to go out there and as monsters and hack apart rival armies, and then have it all sort of covered up? And do they all so fervently believe that they're doing the work of a god, or is there some human psychology to it that they're doing it for mother, or they're doing it because now they're monsters and there's no other way, or are they so hooked on this drug that they can't get out of it? And talk about allegories for the entire world right there, right? Like that's the world in a broad stroke. So that's pretty cool. Kaeryn, what would be an interesting, like, 3-sentence style plot hook if a DM came to you and said, "Hey, I really need kickstart my creativity. I know I want to base a game out of this pirate city, out of the Pearl, but I don't know how to get that going." Like, where would you see the interest in that? Like, what's titillating about that area that would be fun?
For me, it's kind of I guess the economy and I guess back door into the dwarven hold, if you will, because they kind of have some sort of trade going on with the dwarves that nobody else does. And what if something happens to certain supply lines for this pirate city that is this oasis, this pearl, this place that people come and there's all sorts of abundance? Well, what happens if something rocks that boat? And all of a sudden, it's not as lucrative as it was before, or things aren't coming as people are now becoming unrestful. Is that the word?
Restless.
Restless.
Gonna say
They're
violent
doing
criminals, but pirates.
yeah, less. They're doing less gooder.
They're less gooder than they were.
They're more
Yeah.
plundery. Yeah, I think that's really, really cool. And the thought of a lawless town that somehow manages to like limp on, you know, without there being complete and total chaos. That's always been very fascinating to me. You know, the idea of Tortuga and things like that existed in the real world, and then any fantasy equivalent. This kind of, you know, it's the place that the characters go to in the story when they need that one particular kind of person that they have to talk to. You know, the one person who they know can get results, but it's probably going to cost them something. You know, going into Mos Eisley in Star Wars, it's, you know, the same exact kind of thing. And I love the idea of a place like that. And I think it being run by this ruthless pirate queen, like, I would have a hard time passing up the opportunity as a DM to have her be the one who gives the players this quest. Like, she'd have to be involved in it somehow, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I also really want to see what someone does with the library, right?
Yes.
These magic uses that are so like entwined with chaos now that, I mean, they don't have spell books. They have like liches strapped to walls that are, and the thing is, like, it's sort of it much like our the leader of that sort of puritanical town, right? Like, they're in that the ends justify the means mode, and only for them it's become a lifestyle, it's become a science, it's almost become their religion, right? That this is just how things are done. And so I really want to see what someone does, because just throwing it out there as there's this information that the players need to get in there and get, that's a beautiful option, and run with that. But there's got to be something of more substance that someone's going to do with it. It's going to be super creative and far beyond what I can think of. And so I'm super excited to see someone do something with that.
Yeah, one of the ideas that I'd had for that, and I'm just going to throw everything out. I'm not going to save anything back because I'll come up with other stuff if I need to. But this is the whole point of this. So, is because that's where the souls are kind of taken, the departed souls are taken there to kind of be their final resting place. I think it would be really interesting if the party was investigating some kind of malpractice that was going on there, and they end up finding out that it's not just these monsters that these wizards are drawing the spells from. They're actually cataloging spellcasters who have passed, who have died, and they're taking this magic, this spell information from their souls and not actually allowing them to rest.
That's cool.
That's really interesting, because that in turn produces those, because we have the wayfarers, right, who are supposed to like sort of guide the souls over and make sure the undead don't come back. But that's a prolific problem. So here's these wayfarers thinking they've done their job, right? The soul got to the resting spot, and yet here comes this monster aberration of Dave the Wizard, who is a much cooler name than that. But there's that moment of panic and confusion, right? Of like, how did this happen? And maybe because now you have this creature that's forced into this state even more unnaturally, that they're worse than just a normal undead. Because I had thought it'd be pretty cool to do a game with the idea of maybe some of the party are wayfarers, right? You have that cleric, the paladin option, and those are the guys that have the knowledge to use the more or less teleportation beacons that exist out there, right? They can shortcut portions of Sunderhearth by moving from one place to another. And what if that magic was turned off by the library? And so now they have this soul, but now they're forced to travel the depths of Sunderhearth to get it to the library. And what things you encounter with this precious cargo, and how dangerous is it that you have all these monsters that already feed off of life forces and such, and make this soul a relatively powerful magical practitioner. And now you have the monsters that are hunting magic after, like, it's and that's interesting. It's a little bit crazy because you're having to say, all right, hey, for this game we kind of need this cleric and a paladin who wants to play it. And normally I don't run at players like that and say, hey, can someone please play a ranger? Like, I want you to play what you want to play. But nonetheless, I think that's an option for somebody. Take it and run with it, please, and then tell me, report back to us and let us know how it goes when you I feel like we're gonna have to set up a Facebook page for Sunderhearth just so people can say, hey, this is what I'm doing and this is what's working and what's not necessarily as beta feedback, but as we've gotten to experience this with myself with 13 very creative minds so far, but there are untapped creative minds that are going to hopefully see this and take it and run. So I kind of want to see what they come up with as well.
I kind of love that idea because this has been a collaborative world building project from the get-go. So why not continue it with stories from people playing in it? And this is what they're doing. This is their ideas. Like, I love that. Keep it going.
Yeah, like one of the things I was thinking about on my very rushed drive home today in the rain was, you've always had a monsters manual, or you've had the creature codex, or all these other versions. But it would be awesome to see like a Sunderhearth, chronicle or whatever, where it's just these amalgamations of creatures and ideas for monsters that players and GMs have created to exist in this world off of the skeleton that we line out in Sunderhearth. Whether it's, hey, I want to stat this up and put it on the Facebook page, or hey, here's my my write-up on it, and it's just the creative text of it, the prose, and to be able to sort of leave that for people to get a hold of, and then just watch as the chaos of gaming community as a whole gets a hold of this and twists it to sort of suit their needs. I think it's pretty cool. Dice Ogre's already naming his campaign. See that up in the comments.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I love the idea of people being able to provide feedback on the setting especially in that kind of a way, because like getting just straight feedback is always good. That's always useful. But to have people say, "Oh man, this is what I played in this setting. This is the game that I ran." That tells you pretty clearly what is appealing to that person about the setting. So that's always an interesting bit of information to get back. Inadvertent feedback, I guess, is what I would call that.
Yeah, so I mean, honestly, I guess at this point, since the ideas for hooks and stuff will come as we talk, like, what is there that Kaeryn, you've been a silent observer for most of this, like, I mean, I've gotten the chat with you, and I'm sure it's come up in other conversations. But like, what else? And even people like in the chat right now, like, what are some other things that people have as ideas or questions, or what tickled your fancy listening to us at some point that you're like, oh, hey, a few more words on that would be awesome. And we can kind of count that as part of the recap for this, rather than necessarily going through it, session 1, session 2, session 3.
Mm-hmm.
And just
Boy, put me on the spot. Make me remember stuff like from times before. So cool. No, but
that's what I do.
one thing that sticks in my mind, and probably because it's was last session, the pierced, and that villain that did the piercing. I was enthralled with just that thought of this guy doing that, and then the fact that he did that to his own daughter, and then she rebelled. And man, I would love to see how that would play out, like what she's doing in the world, and how she's twisting it to get back at him, that kind of thing. And so that's one thing that's really stuck in my brain, besides the library, because the library is super cool too.
Just I mean, name another game world that has an oubliette near its center.
I love the so I had a thought actually listening to that one about the library, and because we're talking about they would take the children and they become the vessels, and what happens, like, why are they going crazy and stuff? What if when they take over the vessel, the child is still there and becomes part of the wizard? So after a few cycles of this, you have got so many people in your head that no wonder you're going a little crazy, besides just the magic.
I definitely think that's a thing, right? Because it's at some point it's kind of like Xeroxing a Xerox, right? Like you start getting these weird abnormalities that they're now artifacts. Hey, adventurers, there's an artifact I need you to go get.
Imagine if you're, I don't know, like the woman gave their son, to have this wonderful life, and then all of a sudden you see this wizard who has the same mannerisms as the child that you just...
Right. Or imagine one of these guys who at this point is a couple 100 years old and has learned from 20 different magical sources, be they demons, part of a god, monsters, or other magic users, who gets this, put into this childish vessel, right, which is then magically aged. And he shows up back at home because the child's personality is so strong.
Right. This is his home.
Right. This is his home. That's his mom. But now he throws a temper tantrum and, is ripping space time. It's that sort of, what was Reed Richards' kid's name? Yeah, whatever. It gets very comic booky, which is cool. I think you can get away with a lot of that type of stuff inside of Sunderhearth. So Jeremy, you had said that one of the things you were interested in is sneaking in
or
out. The out part we had talked about, that a lot of people had their sort of psychological mental reasons for wanting to get out, right? The idea of this sort of forced claustrophobia, of this desire for the outside, of whether it's pride or whatnot. But what drives a character aside from financial gain? What drives a character to sneak into this place, right? Like this, that's the equivalent of saying, hey guys, so you remember Chernobyl that happened last year? We need you to go into the control room and get the user's manual for us, please? Like what?
Well, I mean, now you're kind of like getting to the semantics of why adventurers go adventuring at all. Like, what person in their right mind is ever going to go into the deep dark hole in the ground where they know there's undead or a fire breathing lizard that's the size of a house, so that they can get some money? Like, you have to be pretty damn desperate. And I think that's exactly what it would be. It's this brazen individual who thinks, I'm going to make a name for myself out here. I can do it better than anybody else has. Or, I'm going to go out there and stake my wealth. I'm going to bring back, more mana kernels than I can carry, because everybody says they literally are just everywhere over here. And I'm going to bring them back and sell them all, and I'll be rich and I can retire. There's a lot of different motivations that would bring somebody inside, I think. But at the heart of it all, I would say probably desperation.
I like the idea of desperation, right? Because you don't have to be necessarily desperate for the money. Because we had talked about, like, inside of Sunderhearth, you can heal people. You can stop poisons. You can resurrect people. Now, that last one's a bit tricky, but it's doable. And so, do you get that rich old politician on the outside who lost his or her child or loved one or what have you, and like they're so desperate now, this like, hey, here's a ton of money, and if you don't like that, also I kidnapped your mother, and if you don't do this, like there's so much that would drive someone. Because if you think about in a normal D&D game, the lure of the power of magic is always pretty high. But in Sunderhearth, it's kind of turned up to 11. Because the outside world doesn't actively, naturally have access to it anymore. Pizza dragons, what?
Oops, the hounds of hell. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a million different reasons why somebody could come up, that they could come up with for why their character would want to come into Sunderhearth. Like you said, it holds so much for someone from the outside, so much mystique and possibility and hope, even though it's really backwards there. Everybody still makes their own clothes and blah blah blah. That's very very backwards to the way they're thinking, but it's the land of possibility. It's like people, whenever they were making the journey to the New World from Europe, they knew that they were going to have it rough. Like, they understood that and they accepted it, but they did that because, in their mind at least, they were told that the possibilities that were available would far outweigh the risk and the penance, if you will, of the way they would have to live when they got here. Now, whether or not that ended up being true for them, another story. But yeah, I think there's plenty of reasons that anybody could come up with, and I think that's part of the joy of creating a character in a setting like this, is when you can have parts of the world that you can directly interact with in a character-specific way. And that helps to define who your character is as a person. The reasoning behind doing something, the motivation, the desires, the drives. Having something, a hook in the setting that you can easily hang that coat on, is, for me, what draws me in as a player for a setting. If I read that kind of information, I'm like, oh, that's what I want to be able to do. That's what helps me create a character that I'm going to want to play for a long, long time.
Well, that's all the questions I had and didn't write down, made up on the spot.
Well, Steve, what's a part that you are really looking forward to as a player?
So
Didn't expect that, did you?
Ha!
It's not so
How the
easy when
table,
you
how
get
the
asked.
tables have turned. No, I think as a player, it would be fun to do some mini campaigns and set them within the Hearth Wardens, right? Like going from recruit to your first couple of missions and seeing that evolution and however that storyteller, that DM sees that evolution. Playing as a wayfarer, or sort of these microcosms. Like I really enjoy in a game setting when you can delve into the microcosms that exist inside of it, because take Faerun, for example. There's too much Forgotten Realms to digest all at one time, and I thought the way they were done was a bit hokey. But if you guys remember back in like third and 3.5, they had prestige classes that were like Tomb Guardian. Like literally, here's your prestige class where all you do is guard this tomb. I'm going, this is a joke. But like Black Flame Zealot, right? The cleric rogues of Bane. Like that was an active microcosm that you get into, and it has its own workings and politics and pulse and wants and desires. And I love exploring the wants and desires of organizations and governments and the powerful NPCs as a character. Getting to see why the story is the way it is because these individuals and organizations made those decisions is really cool to me. So like going to that puritanical town and like Kaeryn was saying, sort of seeing how does it play out now with his wife when she's literally trying to backstab him because her daughter's dead. What is it like to be that fly on the wall, but that active fly, right? Like you're getting tasked to do things and being rewarded with, sure, here's the quest reward, but as a player, you're being rewarded with these snippets of information and insight into the psyche of these NPCs and therefore the world. I think it's super cool. And the fact that there's not necessarily a nailed down definition for all these NPCs means that every time someone tells the story, when Jeremy builds his version of Sunderhearth, when I build mine, when Lloyd Collins builds his, the motivation for this puritanical town, the husband, the wife, they're going to be slightly different, and how they're handling is going to be slightly different. And one's not necessarily better than the other, but it's how you could have replayability in that exact same microcosm. So that's what I look forward to as a player, is being able to explore what other people want to do with those entities.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times when it's done organically, that's often when an idea becomes its best, because you have a bunch of different versions of something, and you can kind of pick and choose what works and what doesn't, what appeals to you and what doesn't, and you can really fine tune it to be the kind of character or location or encounter or whatever that you might want. It can tell the part of your story the way that you want it to, whenever it's left as somewhat wet cement.
Yeah. My dad just said it in the comments. He says different director takes on remakes of movies. And it is that, but even as a player, right? Like when we've all had the joy of playing in a one shot more than once using the same module with different storytellers and being able to enjoy, if it's a well written module and a well told story by that DM, being able to enjoy it even though you kind of know what's coming. You're still able to live in those moments, and so it is that director retelling it, but it's also, it's like when you're an actor on stage and on that one Friday night, your co-actor delivers that line differently, and now your response is different, and now the scene has a different weight to it. And that was always my favorite part of being able to be on stage is, having that discussion afterwards. Well, why did you do that? And it's the smallest thing, like, and I love being able to experience that in games. And I think that the 14 minds who have touched this so far, or 20-ish when you count all the comments in YouTube that have touched this, have done such a good job of crafting something that is organically experienceable. That's not really a real term. There's nothing forced. We're not telling you have to tell a story this way, or that this NPC has to be this way, or Elminster always lives in this tower. Like, it's cool, but like Cole just said, make strong choices. So the players get to make their strong choices about the characters that they want to play, and that DM gets to make his strong choices about the world. And at no point is that one player, and I used to be this player, gonna push up their glasses and go, no. In 037 Year of the Dragon, that's not what happened. I used to be that guy. That's hard to believe, huh? But that's it. Jeremy, get out. Just leave your camera, leave the stream going. You have to go. But yeah, I really look forward to that. Something that we haven't discussed, and it is an NPC motivation, but I'm curious as to how the two of you see it. So the whole sundering happens, and literally apocalypse is knocking on the door. And the queen somehow is talked into, or knows that she is capable of becoming this host for an elemental energy and saving everyone. But like, how does that happen? Like, what in your minds, what happens in those moments? That does someone really come to her and say, Your Majesty, we need you to step into this earth? Now, that seems a bit.
No, I mean, straight up the answer is she's a Cancer. No, I'm sorry. That's a dig at my wife. My wife will put herself in front of anyone in danger. She will absolutely lay herself in the line of fire on the sake of someone else. It can be a perfect stranger, somebody in the grocery store. It won't matter. So I definitely think that the queen has this matronly care, this mother bear type bearing about her. And I think she doesn't even hesitate whenever the decision happens. In my mind, she doesn't.
So, like, in your mind, is she of an elemental bloodline, or does this ancient spell just, someone knows of a way to put up a magical barrier, but it's going to require this sacrifice, and this is just sort of how it's represented in this particular case?
I'm going to jump in here. I like to think that there's a reason why she was queen in the first place. Like, she does come from this noble stock, and maybe it's an elemental line somewhere in the ancestry, or maybe it's dragon even. It could be almost anything. But when this apocalypse is coming down and she is realizing that she is probably the only living person, at least in this area, that has the strength to do what needs to be done to save her people because of that lineage. And so
what if, like, kind of again borrowing from Dune, what if her house was not just like a noble house? She's like a descendant of this group of people, this cult, this family, one and the same, whatever, that knew this was going to happen someday, that this was prophesized, and she just understood that if it happens in my lifetime, that's what I'm going to do, because that's what my family's oath has been for 1,000 years.
So that was exactly what it was in my mind, is that her family had been protectors for a long time, and there's always this, if this happens in your lifetime, you must do that, and that's a known risk of being in this family and taking up that mantle. And so she's a little girl, and she's got this, robust younger 20s wizard that is her tutor. And as she ages into the queen, he is this advisor to her. And there just comes a moment where he comes in one day and it's like, it's time. Like, you've been called to task. And so, like, that's it, right? That's her destiny, is to fulfill this prophecy. And there's not anything necessarily written into it where it's like, hey, yeah, the god of magic's going to die. It's just like, there's going to be there's going to become a time where you have to make the sacrifice for your people, and it will save them. And so I think Jeremy's right. I think without question, she just goes, all right, like, let's go.
Yeah, I think there's probably some kind of like signs, that they were looking for. The sun rises, twice in one day, something, I don't know.
Right.
And I think that the cult or the family or whatever that she is a part of has been so devout, even though it hasn't happened, like through their entire existence, that they've remained devout about it, that I think they're seen as a little strange, a little overzealous. Like, that's not going to happen. Like, so
right.
They're the only ones who were looking for these signs still. And when they say, oh, the planets were coming really close to aligning, everybody else is like, this again? Like, this is like the fourth time that you guys have warned about this. It's, y'all are just crazy. So when it actually happens, everybody else is in a panic and running around screaming, not understanding what's going on, because they don't still study the prophecy. But this one sect is like, we know what to do, and it's your time.
Right, yeah. It's they're held on to the old ways. The other thing that struck me with her was, because I was running off the ideas of prophecy as well, is that no queen ever has a child before the age of 30, whatever, insert your age here. And the reason being is the prophecy says this: if this is going to happen, it'll happen before, your 30th year. And that's so that the queens can prepare themselves. And she doesn't know, or she knows, no one else knows, and the king doesn't know that she's with child when this goes down. And that's how her daughter becomes the baby elemental that the king doesn't know about.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely doable. In my mind, I was kind of thinking that the prophecy doesn't involve her being a queen. The fact that she is a queen adds a layer of difficulty to that sacrifice. Okay. So like the king's like, well, no, you can't. Like your father mentioned in the chat, like, you can't do that. Like, I forbid it. You're the queen. That exempts you from this duty. You don't have to do that. But she's like, no, you don't understand. Like, this supersedes everything. Like,
right. I've been an insert family name longer than I've been a queen.
Yeah, like, exactly. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of drama and tension, even just outside of the immediate court. The entire land is going to be reacting to this, especially if she is the kind of queen that is liked. People are going to be freaking out. Like, this can't happen. Like, she can't do this.
Yeah, I mean, even maybe she's from this family, but not of nobility, and so she, like, this is one of those, like, the king takes a peasant wife type of things, because he truly loves her, and she's elevated to that position, and it starts to concern, if you were to go back and look at her, it concerns her about this choice of duty, right? Is she queen or is she protector, and how does she do both? And the idea that, the child part of it, and if this comes to task, what happens to her child, whether she's pregnant at the time or not, like, if all of a sudden she has to give up her humanity to become this protector, she saves her family, but now she's leaving them behind. How does that tension play out in Sunderhearth today? I mean, I guess that depends on how political of a game the DM wants to run and kind of set that tension. I definitely think it's this beautiful scapegoaty thing or mockery thing that the brother on the outside has, right? Like, he publicly laments the loss of his wife to Sunderhearth, not knowing that she still thrives as this elemental, and it's this very cloyish, like fake lamenting, whereas on the inside you really do have this beast of a king now who is truly torn, right? Because his people would be gone if it wasn't for his wife's sacrifice, but at the same time she had to sacrifice herself to protect his people, and isn't that the duty of a king, to protect his people? So yeah, man, you could definitely go you can get a lot of mileage out of the angst of that, I guess.
Definitely. And I think the people probably take pilgrimage to see the hearth. The people who know, or it might be secret. Is it secret?
So the only people who know are the hearth wardens.
Okay, so maybe just amongst the hearth wardens. Well, we had talked about that. They had to be basically like baptized in.
Right, they had to be inducted, and
fire.
they basically walk through the hearth in order to be.
That's right.
Term right, but she judges them.
Maybe in the public, though, like in Sunderhearth, maybe there is some sort of holiday or a celebration because the populace knows that she gave her life to save them somehow, and so she's honored every year or however many moons you want to do it.
Yeah,
very much kind of a almost a Virgin Mary kind of vibes. There's statues to her all over the place. People are constantly leaving things to, even though she's not deified herself. In their minds, she's a Catholic saint, a very high-ranking person of piety in their minds, somebody that they would strive to be like.
Right, yeah, she's Saint Joan of Arc all of a sudden.
Exactly, yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, and I think one of the kings should be known as the Widowed King. Very cool. That sounds good.
I think it should be the one on the outside.
I was thinking that too, and he's going to use it.
He plays it.
He plays it up.
Yeah.
I see this guy being played by Joaquin Phoenix, and that's probably because I just rewatched Gladiator, and that's very much.
I love that movie so much.
Commodus's character.
Yeah,
he's just kind of gross all around.
I love that. What do I do with my thumb?
He's such a shit in that movie,
Mm-hmm.
but he's so good at it.
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yes. Oh, speaking of the thumbs up thing, I don't know how true this is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I read this thing the other day that was saying that in the Gladiator games there was no thumb up. It was thumb down for put your weapons down, and then thumb in to kill them, like drive the sword through them. So the thumb up was something that came later, but
because we go,
yeah. Nonetheless, I thought that was pretty cool. Man, so I know we had talked a little bit about aesthetic inside of Sunderhearth, and this would be something that would kind of have a sliding scale to it, depending on like what time frame, how close after the Sundering you set your game and stuff like that. Because the inside, until really the Council of Martyrs on the outside pushes it and they sort of start opening Sunderhearth a bit more to travel back and forth, everything is left to being reused and recycled and rebuilt. And so I love this I love when I see character art, and some people in OutTab have done some amazing character art recently, where like the armor looks hodgepodge, right? Like, oh, I have this chain sleeve from this, and this leather
The leather
from this.
patch.
Yeah, I love that, and then I love it even more because your buildings in town and your carriages are the same way, right? Like,
You've got this broken building because it was kind of somewhat destroyed in the sundering, right? That was made of brick, and then they've patched it up with the wood from the place, and so you've got this like stone kind of bottom
right,
top. Yeah.
right, and people are like, well, you can just go chop down trees and make new wood, and you're like, no, the trees get up and talk, and they kill you. Like, so maybe we don't do that. Yeah, piecemeal. Or I guess maybe it's piecemeal. Haha. Wow, I'll see myself out. But I love this idea that, because that is the aesthetic, right? And there's no one that makes fun of that. That's just life. But it means when you see this like beautiful red lacquered carriage roll into town, that people crap themselves and run away, because that's magic. Or they're strong enough that they could take on the trees and the beasts out there and do it. And so these symbols of prestige amongst those who want them are delving through these ruins looking for not tapestries and jewels, but they want a leather jerkin or overcoat that's in one piece and not patched. And that becomes a status symbol. So you're either ballsy and brave enough to go into these ruins, or you're crazy enough that you're using magic to repair it, right? Like, how vain are you that you're going to risk insanity to mend your jacket? And so, like, in my mind, I keep seeing this red lacquered carriage roll in the town, and you get that very sort of, Alucard Dracula feel to it. And this little old woman steps out, and people are just like giving her a wide berth because there's a reason she has that. And that's scary. It's sort of that fancy car in the gangster movies, right? It rolls up and the kids on the street just clear. You don't know who's in it, but you know. Or the joke from Monty Python, how do you know he's the king? Well, they ain't got shit on him. Like, oh man,
We're just gonna let that hang.
that's right.
Let that hang out to dry there.
Right, yeah. Baba Yaga rolls up in a carriage. Yipes.
Yeah. No joke.
I ain't messing with her.
From within deeper into Sunderhearth.
Right. I have also come for your children. Yeesh. Everybody wants our kids.
That little old woman's played by Clint Eastwood.
Like, it's Clint Eastwood as Baba Yaga and Carl Weathers as her sister. Like,
oh man.
in case you're wondering, no, Jeremy's not a casting agent, and there's good reason.
I could be.
But also, I defy them to tell me they wouldn't see that movie.
Dude,
I would go see it.
Clint Eastwood in drag, playing Baba Yaga. That's a movie of his that I would probably really want to pay money to watch. Especially if he directs.
Oh wow. That sounds like it'd be like a Taika Waititi movie. Like, he's gonna direct Baba Yaga starring Clint Eastwood. Wow. Okay. Well, that took a weird left turn.
Rein it back in.
Crazy train. So, okay. So tell me about the area where this river empties into the salt flats that used to be the ocean. What's something that's interesting that you think is going on there?
You're asking me?
Yes. Or Steve, or both.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't
Yeah,
at the same
definitely
time.
asking you 100%.
So you'll have to remind me. I don't know where this.
Okay, so there is a river that runs near the capital of Sunderhearth when it's one piece. And it sort of feeds this moat that's around the castle. So when they put up the wall, the barrier for Sunderhearth, it cuts off their access to water because, well, the ocean is gone. And now this moat is chopped in half, and so the part on their side goes stagnant. One of the very first things that was done to sort of alleviate this is that part of the Sunderhearth barrier was taken away so that water could flow. And then they sort of dug a man-made river from the moat out to the salt flats to let the water drain out so it wouldn't be stagnant and they could get a constant supply of fresh water, as well as being able to barge in supplies from the outside world. So you now have this like large cliff with a waterfall, ostensibly, that should be an ocean that is now a salt flat.
That's much
Yeah.
lower. So where's the water going?
It hits down there, and then where is it going? Like, I mean, there's so much earth there that it could just be being absorbed. It could be turning into a bog.
What if going through the barrier, actually, it's picking up some of this magic that's causing the barrier to exist in the first place. And so this water is infused, and as it heads out towards the salt flats, it actually just it doesn't go down the waterfall or when it's, I don't know. It kind of maybe becomes kind of like a maelstrom whirlpool area where it's just kind of maybe being absorbed back up into the barrier that is around.
Yeah.
So like maybe by the time that it actually gets to the waterfall, it becoming airborne, essentially, it becoming aerated as it cascades over the edge, that triggers whatever latent magic is in it, and it somehow rapidly evaporates, or
like it's missed by then,
right.
as it's
Just
falling
hangs
over,
just hangs as clouds there.
And maybe like it even leaves some like deposits behind, some kind of strange mineral that collects eventually in this area, and it collects and builds almost like crystalline structures, like underground, just slowly over time, just moisture just collecting on the same point over and over and over again, and depositing
So like a stalagmite?
these minerals. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I think it'd be kind of cool.
I like that. I also just like the horror of it, meaning that if you go over the edge, you're just falling 1,000 feet on the spikes. Also, because everything is Sunderhearth is a lot like Australia. Everything wants to kill you,
even the ground.
Yeah, especially the ground. Yeah. I mean, I think the ground wanting to kill you is pretty much everywhere. It's very seldom is it the fall that kills you, right? It's always the ground.
It's always the stop.
It wasn't so sudden. Yeah, because I really like the idea of that mist. Because I was thinking that maybe the bottom of it is a home to sort of like the I don't know an undead, or some other monster that has sort of made that their lair, like conditions are right for it. So like jellies or an undead or cloakers or something, and then you just put that Sunderhearth twist onto them. So cloaker jellies instead of an ochre jelly. They hang from the cliffs and have bat wings, but also dissolve you with acid. Yipes. But when you said the stalagmite part, I was thinking those weird bat things from Pitch Black, right? They were coming out of the ground, and so like, what if it's like a bee's nest, right? Like, like paper wasps like build their nest out of like that like chewed up wood. These things do the same thing. They build their homes out of like this stalagmite. They go out there, they suck it up and spit it back into being these nests, and so they're not like super dangerous unless you just aggravate them.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's cool. And the idea of having this massive, like, hillside colony, this hive of these, the little individual rows of holes. And some of them are full, and some of them have, it's just this constant din of buzzing activity. That's like, I live where hornets and wasps are incredibly common through most of the year. We get them on our patio all year round. So the idea of one of those that's large enough that I could walk into one of those cells, that's fucking terrifying.
It's frightening. But what if there's a reason to actually do that? Like, what if whatever they're making is something super rare, even for Sunderhearth? Like, it's maybe very pure shard or whatever magic vessel. What is that? The arcane kernels. What if they're making something similar, but that it doesn't involve a soul?
What if they're just large enough that you can ride them, and that's the easiest way across this salt flat?
Ew, but yeah.
Yeah, and then there's got to be some kind of like group of nomadic tribesmen that have gotten down the ability to tame them, to domesticate them,
or at least just not get eaten by them.
Right, they're just less likely to be eaten by them.
You can't take on a whole colony. That's just dumb.
They basically just become like the Dothraki, only they ride these wasps.
Take that, Martin.
Oh man. So one of the things that we had talked about were the sort of like facsimiles of ints, right? These undead treants that are on the edge of the that sentient hill area, and we said that they would that they sort of harbor the ill will of the people near them. So you as a GM, knowing that that's what this is one of your questions or two of your questions for your players then, like, what is your dark secret? Like, what is it that you wouldn't want anyone else to find out? Or what's your worst quality, or however you want to phrase it, right? Because being able to play on the psychology of the characters is going to be very powerful in this setting. But even more so when you get these, maybe they're just called echoes, right? Because like hollow trees, and then they just echo like your worst parts of you back at you. Like that's have you guys had a chance to see the New Mutants movie? So they Danny Moonstar, her ability is she makes your worst fears come true, like psionically, and they kind of twist that a little bit in this. But that idea, right? It's you enter this area and like your worst fears are shown, or your weaknesses, or the things you want to keep hidden. And so I guess, if you want to play that way, you just include that in your list of character questions.
Yeah, I'm a pretty big proponent of having that kind of work up front from players whenever I run a campaign. Not necessarily shorter than that, but definitely for a campaign. Secret is one thing that I always ask for, and it can even be something that your character is not even aware of. It could be somebody's hunting them, or this deep dark part of their personality may even be unknown to even them. And I think for Sunderhearth specifically, I would probably ask in addition, like, what is your id? What is your uncontrolled, innermost, darkest secret? Um, the game that I'm going to be running later this month, next week, is called 10 Candles, and it has a really interesting trait that it asks for from the players ahead of time called a brink. And it's essentially, what does your character do when all other pretense has been stripped away? Like when their back is against the wall and they have no other choice. How do they behave in that moment, essentially? So it's a really interesting lens to examine a character through. And I think with Sunderhearth that would be a very fitting thing to have in your utility belt as a player ahead of time.
That Sager says Sunderhearth should have a questionnaire for characters, like a few games that he knows of. And I agree, but again, I think that's something that Kaeryn and I had talked about this too, and M talked about it when they were on with us, and it's the idea of like these different charts that you can roll on, right? And then we're gonna have some tables up, and I think we would have a list of, hey, here's some starter questions, right? But the thing that I would preface it with is, if you're gonna ask what's a character's darkest fear or whatnot, you have to have that lines and veils question. Like, you have to have that conversation of where do we not go, because you're psychosis and psychology is part of why we all play these games, is to escape it and to explore it. And I wouldn't want to. I'm not a big fan of the word trigger because I think it gets overused and abused, but I wouldn't want to have that happen to anybody. So yeah, so it would be an optional thing, right? But having some questions ready to go, here's an idea of 10 generic questions to sort of get the feel for it. It's not a bad idea. I like that idea of having that sort of in the outline of the setting itself.
Yeah, I think a lot of that kind of stuff, like Dice Ogre said in the chat, is super important to go over in a session 0. Like, that's, if you're discussing the setting that you're playing in as a part of your session 0, that's fine, but make sure that that's not the dominant part of the conversation that you're having. Like, really what you need to be talking about is the kind of places that you're willing to explore emotionally, psychologically, all that kind of stuff. Get to know everybody at the table and what they're comfortable with, where their boundaries are, lines and veils, red light, green light, X card, all of the kinds of things that help establish that. It's good to have an open and frank conversation about it up front as well. For me, at least, if the person's comfortable doing so, that is. Because that goes so much further than just a simple, like, one sentence listed in a document about lines and veils. If you make it really known to me, hey, like, this bothers me, I don't want it in the game at all, then I'm going to do my damnedest to make sure that it's not in the game. And if somebody else comes to me with an idea for their character that I feel could skate too close to that or violate that, then I'm just going to take that character, that other player aside and say, hey, look, let's steer it away from that just for the sake of another player. Like, we're not going to touch on that during this game. So
right.
I think that's the best way to handle it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I've often referred to it just as the social contract, right? It's so much more than will you show up and will you play, right? Like if people didn't want to show up and play, they wouldn't be signing up for games. But the social contract has to extend to the people that you're playing with, and I think it's worth maybe really and getting the community's feedback on this in a game setting where we're relying so much on aspects of psychology. I think having a little, chat about that at the beginning of the document, about, referring to lines and veils or X cards and why they're important and how that is part of the social contract, and how me telling Jeremy that he can't play, a baby eating kidnapper isn't a slight against him. It's for the benefit of someone else. And how do you maturely take that without thinking that, the GM hates your character idea? So I think having a little blurb on that. So, again, there are many of you in the community that are much better at that than I am. So if anybody has thoughts on that and wants to tag up with us and let us know, that'd be amazing.
And I think a lot of people are willing to explore darker corners of their personal life through a game, as long as they feel comfortable in doing so, as long as they feel like it's a safe place to do so. So you need to do what you can as a GM and as a fellow player at the table to create it being a safe place. When those kinds of subjects are breached, give them the gravity that they're due. Don't make light of them. Don't make a joke out of it. Don't make it a source of comedy. Treat it with respect, and you will find that people will be willing to go deeper if you have given them that solid foundation to feel safe to do so.
I agree.
Which is why I can punish the hell out of you guys in Beneath the Banner Shadow.
That's right, because we all forgot to answer that question. Oh man, I'm gonna be so sad when my little baby sister turns up to be a villain. Like,
I would never.
Whew. So, what? We're about almost an hour and 20 now.
Yep. Just.
Hey, Kaeryn, there's this really cool part now. You want to start? I don't know if you've been thinking about it, or if you got anything else to add before that. Like, what you got for us before we take you to task here?
I think it's 2 things. No.
or 3.
Or
Your
3
choice.
or 4 or 5. I don't know. I think we kind of hit on everything. I had one question actually, as a kind of sitting outside, because we keep talking about like Sunderhearth inside and then Sunderhearth outside. Character wise, like mechanically speaking, are they going to be the same? Are you going to make characters the same if you're playing outside of Sunderhearth versus playing inside?
I think the only real challenge that you'd have as a player, if you go to the GM who's like, hey, I got this campaign for outside of Sunderhearth, and you're like, awesome, I'm gonna play a warlock. It's that you need to be able to explain it in a character important cinematic way that fits within the scope of the intended campaign. And if you can do that and the GM agrees to it, then rock on, Dragonborn Warlock. And everyone else is using flintlocks. Like, that's cool. I've got a good buddy I played with a lot in person until COVID happened. I haven't gotten to see the dude since April. And he's a big fan of saying that balance does not exist in RPGs. And if that's what you're worried about, you're missing the point. Right? Think about think about Star Wars. Like, how does Han Solo, a smuggler, stack up to be in the room with Jedis? Like, it makes no sense. They're not built off the same points, same template. I mean, hell, they weren't even reading the same set of rules when they made their characters. And so that's cool, as long as, I don't know, like, I guess they tell you in my line of work, do whatever your career can handle. Do whatever the campaign can handle. And that again is your session 0. That's talking to the GM, that's talking to other players and saying, how do we want to do this? Because if everyone else is really set on playing these, dwarven, musket users, and you're like, nah, I'm a Dragonborn sorcerer, well, you're going to outsign them at points. Like, you're capable of more they are. Like, you have the spotlight too often. So it's going to be harder for you to find ways to pass it to other people. So yeah, I think mechanically the characters are exactly the same. I know we had talked about, I really like the idea of using the sanity rule from the DMG. And I think that I would encourage that to be part of playing in Sunderhearth. But I think that exists just as much in the outside as it does on the inside. That's my long answer.
Yeah, I think I would have a similar answer in that I would likely limit class choice if we were playing outside of Sunderhearth. But typically with my campaigns, what I tell my players is this is what I want you guys to use as available character generation material. Anything outside of that, you need to bring it to me and ask me about it. It's not necessarily off the table. It just, you're going to have to sell me on it if it's outside of the scope of the story that I think we're going to be telling, or if it doesn't make a lot of sense to me in the setting. And if you can pitch it to me in a way that makes a lot of sense with what we're going to be doing, in particular the kind of tone or genre that we're going to be doing, then I am much more likely to let that happen. But I encourage a lot of people that are DMs to understand no is a possible answer. A lot of people will tell you that it's not. They're wrong. It is okay to use the word no and not follow it up with but.
Right. I once got told by a very smart person that we're all used to the yes and, right? Like yes and. It's how you do improv. But when it comes to telling someone no for like their characters or something like that, like you use it in management a lot. It's no and here's why. Right. So it's not just offhand I'm telling you no, it's here's the why. And then if you and maybe that's something that's going to come up for newer DMs who are running a Sunderhearth, they want to run an outside campaign and here's people coming up with inside character ideas. The no and gives you an opportunity to say, no, you can't do that. And here's the reason, but here's parts of that character I liked. So how can we adapt those to fit what we were aiming for so that you still get to play the type of character you want? Because your character is so much more than the numbers on the sheet and the make-believe spells they can throw. Right? Like, I mean, we've had so many sessions of banners where I'm not even sure we've rolled dice. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. And in a game where you're encouraged to explore the psychology of the characters, you'll find times, I would imagine, Sunderhearth where you're never going to roll dice. Right? Where it's the real adventure is exploring that part of your companion, of learning why they so desperately need to get out of Sunderhearth or into Sunderhearth, or what drives them towards the center versus what drives you towards the center, or away from it. And I think it's gonna be a lot of Sunderhearth is exploring drive and risk versus reward. Right? If you're driven to the center, what is the reward that's there that you're willing to risk X, Y, or Z? But because it is 10:30 and because I have to go back to work at 5:00 in the morning, is it fair to ask Kaeryn for her signature at this point? And
I think we have to, actually.
Okay.
I think it's a must.
So I am a big proponent of like superstitions and stuff in worlds, and especially in fantasy worlds. And where I'm going to come from with this is that Sunderhearth itself is volatile with the magic it has. It's chaotic. It is an unknown entity, really. And I feel that the people who live there, they know this, they've lived it day in, day out, their ancestors, etc. And it's come to the point where parents do not tell their children stories because words become real. And what you tell people can manifest. And so that all those horror stories that we're told as children, they don't do that because that would make them real. So I believe like words have weight in Sunderhearth. They actually do things.
I like that. And I like the social implications that has, right? Like you always hear like my word is my bond. So like when like I think that maybe even extends into business, there's not a whole lot of written contracts. Like it's verbally agreed to in front of a couple of different people. And that's it, right? Because you're speaking it into existence. Like
yeah.
And so that's a form of superstitious magic that exists without doing magic. But people are so weirded out and afraid of it actually being real that they become bound by it.
Exactly.
Right. So that's pretty cool. In this very chaotic world, that means that the stories that kids get told are these logical, like Aesopian fables versus the really fantasy, monstery boogeyman, or because your mom's not going to tell you that the monster's going to snatch you because
she doesn't.
She actually wants you to come home.
It's almost like the opposite of what's maybe happening outside in the outside Sunderhearth, where you tell those children those stories. You're telling your kids these like you said, logical and truth stories that you want to have happen.
Dice Ogre had asked earlier if there's fae in Sunderhearth, and I was like, oh, we haven't really talked about it. And he just said, now fairies are real, made from stories. That's awesome. Like the little like gremlins and fairies that exist live around populations because they are when that person, storyborn, they're when that person screws up and they do say something like, it'll snatch your toes. And the kid comes back not with bloody stumps, just with no freaking toes.
And it puts more emphasis on the bard. Like honestly, like the bard has got to watch their magics that they say, or part of it, right? That this is how their magics are.
I like that a lot. I also really like the idea that you now have rumor mongers who are these storytellers in dark alleys who will do their best to speak something into existence for you for a fee.
Yeah, almost very like black magic, bad witch doctor kind of thing. Back alley magic. I like that a lot.
Right. I like that a lot. Especially because it's not the person who does it isn't using magic. They're relying on the chaos of Sunderhearth to do it. So they escape the ramifications directly of using magic. Like they're not going to grow feathers or get eyes. But when they talk about this toe snatching monster, and now it's real, there's no guarantee that tomorrow that story person does not get their toes snatched.
Exactly. Yeah. Like you've left it out into the world.
And I like the idea that it's not a guarantee.
Right.
That like not everything that's just said happens. It's like the repetition of something being said. And so like
behind it too.
Yeah, exactly. So a story being told over and over again, each time is like a toss of the dice of it coming up as a possible, like,
I like that.
The world manifesting it into truth.
Another really cool aspect of this is we had talked about clerical magic in Sunderhearth, inside of it proper, not necessarily being a god stepping down and saying, all right, cool, here's your spells, but your belief that you would be able to heal somebody. And so that is the purest example of people speaking it into their belief is what carried them.
Yeah.
And that same tenacity and
literally a prayer,
radiant magic is what allows people to make gremlins and boogeymen. And I really love the idea of calling them storyborn.
Yeah, I like that name.
I think that's
like
awesome.
that's beautiful. Like so fae are storyborn, right? Those are the red caps and the changelings that steal babies and
all sorts of things.
Yeah,
cool.
I think they're the ones that tell the stories. And so there are, other people who aren't Fae who have taken that up and then do this kind of magic, like you said, in the back alleys in the dark. But they're very much like, nay, like that's not okay. You don't belong here, and that's why these bards tend to be these wanderers from place to place.
They get. Thank you. You said your piece and leave.
Right.
Don't want to say no more.
Right. No songs, just the news, please. But I also think it's awesome that you get these guys that tell these stories, or women that tell these stories, and they speak this gremlin into being, and it's like, oh yeah, the farmer was killed by this monster, and that's what they get paid to do, right? They repeat it and they tell this story, and eventually that happens. Well, now this monster has no purpose, and so eventually it comes looking for, naturally, who spoke it into being. And that is the risk of doing this. So people who would tread that for money become these bad bards who have to travel town to town telling these spooky stories, so that whatever monster it is that they spoke into being constantly has a purpose and leaves them alone.
Oh, yeah. Go to the next one. Yeah. Like that. I like that.
Hey guys, I'm a bard. Burn him.
They shut the door at the gate in your face.
Right. Like,
no
like
thanks.
the wizards are used to seeing the no necromancers allowed, but the no bards? Like, huh. Very cool.
Yeah, I like that a lot. That's awesome.
All right.
So,
I mean, that does it.
I mean, yeah. 12 months, man. A full year. 12 episodes.
Wow. How's it feel?
It feels like, as slow as this year's been, this has gone by really fast.
Yeah. Yeah, I would have to agree. But at the same time, it's awesome to be able to put this away. This part of this project away. To be able to say that it's done, it's completed, I can check that off, and there is now a beginning, a middle, and an end to this part of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a cool feeling.
And then there is so much
Chapter
paper.
We don't talk about that.
Ready?
Right.
That's
for Sunderhearth 2, the papering.
future us problems.
Right. But I guess on that note, there is a document to come, with all this sort of organized, and hopefully a laid out PDF to come, and then something to do with that. How that's going to be handled is for discussion at some point. But yeah, seriously, anybody who is interested in helping out in some fashion, chime in. I don't know exactly what we're going to need yet, other than psychologists and stiff drinks.
Time.
That's not any different than normal, though.
Right.
We need to go to that library where the time is different.
That's right. And speaking of time, I'm not putting a timeline on this right this second. Because, man, talk about fail to deliver. But this has been awesome, Jeremy. Thank you so much for like tackling this with me, along with the 12 other individuals who have come on. And it was really cool to have my dad come in and be a part of this, and then very awesome that your buddy got to come on. And it's cool to see part of the world that shaped us as creators and players, and have that that real life connection to an otherwise, I mean, at least in our experience, I know you and Kaeryn have met in real life, but it's been a very virtual friendship, which is just amazing, and I would not give it up for anything. But to be able to real life anchor it with influences from our real world into this project has been awesome. And then, I mean, just, man, 12 incredible individuals who have come on, and I want to say never disappointed, but it was never a question that they were going to. Like, Like we had an incredibly high caliber group of people say, "Hey, I want to be part of this."
Yeah, I would agree. And there was people that we even weren't able to find, an opening for. We only had 12 individuals to choose from, and it made it difficult. Some of the choices were hard, but I'm very happy with how it came out. And whenever you pitched the idea to me, like I said, I couldn't say yes fast enough. Not only do I love world building, but I love talking about gaming. I love discussing it. I love talking about ideas and building them with other people. The collaboration and the creative zeal that it gives me is it's like something I put right into my veins. I love it. I can't get enough of it. So the two together, the chance to have collaboration on building a world, it's a fantastic idea, and it's not something that I've seen anybody else do. So it was a great concept, and the experiment thus far has been a ton of fun. And I'm excited to run games in this.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Yeah, I do realize now that we missed a golden opportunity at the beginning of this episode, though, because often in episodes, one of us has said, "Hey, this is your first time tuning in. It's cool. You can start here, and it doesn't matter." This might be the one episode where starting here would make the least sense out of all of them, and but that's all right. If you started here, I mean, thanks for watching, and now go back and watch the other 11 of them, and then say something in the comments. So, yeah, yeah, I think I will go ahead and sometime after the holidays get a Facebook group up for the work on this and the play of this, and not to detract from any of the incredible groups that we already have, but to be a harbor for ideas so that it's not flooding other stuff. And just so I can keep track of it, because this has become, I joked in the comments earlier that like our little baby's all grown up, and it kind of is, right? Like it's cool to see this, especially when it's got 14 parents. So I'm looking forward to it, man. Just not the typing part.
We'll figure it out, I'm sure. Okay, so yeah, before we put a nail in this coffin, Kaeryn, is there anything that you want to say as we head out here? Anything that you want to tag onto the end? I mean, other than me just like literally saying goodnight, you're gonna be the last person that says anything about building of Sunderhearth. Not to put any pressure on you or anything, but
Wow.
the final one.
That's harsh. um Oh man, no, blank pressure. You're doing this to me.
This is the part where you just say, "Let's talk about magic."
I was just going I was like, how do I bring up Hearth Wardens and magic in the same sentence without making it feel forced?
That's right.
No, this is I don't even know what to say now. We should all just play.
That's perfect.
That's right.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for deciding to come on and agreeing to be our guest for this episode. It's always a joy to have you on the channel. And,
thank you for having me. I'm very honored to be sitting here right now and talking to you guys. It's wonderful.
Yep. Yeah. The creativity has been astounding. And I think probably for me the most surprising part has been how easily it has come. How whenever the tap was just opened, it just came. And everybody was more than willing to work with one another and support each other's ideas and build upon them. And that natural flow of creativity was really exciting to watch. I know Steve has done theater before, and I did theater in college as well, and it was very reminiscent of that. It's very reminiscent of actually playing in a game with really good players, of being able to volley the ball back and forth and not let it hit the ground, and it just becomes better and better and better, and more impressive whenever you have people who are willing to work with one another as opposed to constantly trying to steal the thunder or the spotlight. So as a creator in that regard, it was really, really awesome to watch happen. And yeah, I'm thankful that we got to host it here on my channel. That makes me very, very proud. And I'm happy that this is going to be here and will live here for as long as I can keep the channel, for people to come and find and explore this world. Maybe even if they're going to run a game in this world, to come back to this video series to get a little more insight about something as it happened whenever we improvised it. And that idea makes me very happy, very excited to hear about what happens next. Not just at my table or at Steve's table or anyone else who joined us as a guest, but people that we may not know, people that may find out about Sunderhearth through a friend of a friend or whatever. Yeah, I think that's really cool. It's going to live on in infamy. Mustache twirl again. Full circle. All right. I think that's about it for me. I've rambled on long enough, and Steve is going to turn into a pumpkin. So we need to get out of here. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in, whether you watched along with us live this evening or whether you may be tuning in at some point in the future. It is sincerely appreciated. If you do like this kind of content, please hit the like button, subscribe, all of that YouTube business. And yeah, I'll be seeing you soon. But until then, may your dice roll high and your snacks always be within reach.